Good morning, everyone. This is Jasper. I thank you for the opportunity for me to present my research as my final requirement for the course on statistics applied in environmental management. On March this year, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued its sixth assessment report drawing on findings from more than 500 most trusted scientists in the world. The report asserts that there is a 50% chance that the global temperature will rise or reach or surpass 1.5 degrees Celsius between 2021 to 2040. This is a grim news to the proponents and advocates of the Paris Agreement, which belabored to limit the rise of global temperature to 2 degrees by the end of the century. Yet, a dilemma is presented by the United Nations in its Global Report on Population, which expects that there is a rise of the global population by nearly 2 billion in the next 30 years. With these two essential figures showing increases in the coming years, governments of the world are still charged with ensuring that the people has access to their basic needs for their survival. And this is the main focus of our research. At the core of this research, we explore the relationship between the aggravating conditions of global warming caused by greenhouse gas emissions and that of the country's economic development. It is very tempting to use just two indicators, the GDP and the GHG, but we'll have other indicators that we will be exploring that I'll be presenting in a little while. The main sources of our data are statistical data coming from the OECD, or the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. We have also explored data presented by the World Bank and its data bank. We will be using these data to come up with or to do our hypothesis testing and also come up with an analysis and recommendation. In the analysis of our data, which are continuous variables, we use the Pearson correlation coefficient R to test our hypothesis. The Pearson correlation coefficient is represented by a number between 1 and -1 that measures the strength and direction of the relationship between two variables. The data were also loaded to Jamovi, which is a user-friendly statistical software for processing, analysis, and reporting. In the screen right now is an annual data of greenhouse gas emission of the Philippines per 1,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in the past 2 decades. As we overlay the gross domestic product of the country to the GHG emission over the years, it is visually observable that both indicators are on the same trajectory. Further processing the data shows that there is a strong positive and significant correlation between the country's GHG emission and the GDP with an R of 0.94 and a P lower than 0.001. This means that as the GHG emission increases, the GDP levels of the country is also increasing. This can be driven by the increased production of major industries or sectors of the country. As Dr. Sabin O'Hara of the University of the District of Columbia, there are 5 main pillars that we explore further to indicate the economic development of a country. So we also looked into these 5 pillars to check the correlation between the GHG and these pillars or in these indicators. As you can see in the screen right now, 3 out of the 5 indicators on economic development shows positive, strong correlation between GHG. And one of the indicators shows a negative correlation, which we're going to be exploring further in the next slides. So briefly on the succeeding slides, we'll be looking at the 5 pillars or the economic indicators that we use to test the relationship between GHG and the economic development of the Philippines. In the first one, the indicator on the pillar for education, we looked at GHG of the Philippines against the literacy rate of adults about 15 years old. And the analysis shows that there is a strong positive correlation with an R of 0.70, though with a p-value higher than 0.05. On the health indicator, the correlation testing shows a strong positive significant correlation with an R of 0.93 with a p-value of less than 0.001. On the environment indicator, on the other hand, looking at GHG against the exposure of the people to CO2 pollution exceeding the World Health Organization guideline of 2.5 parts per million, the resulting test shows a strong positive significant correlation with an R of 0.80 and with a P of lower than 0.01. So as your GHG increases, the risk of exposure of the people to pollution above the World Health Organization guidelines also increases. On the social indicator, comparing GHG against unemployment, the resulting test shows the moderate negative correlation with an R of 0.39, but with a p-value of 0.05. This is actually expected because as you increase your GHG resulting to productivity, there is a potential decrease of your unemployment of the country. On the communication aspect, we looked at the GHG figures and its relationship between the internet access of the people, and the resulting test shows a strong positive significant correlation with an R of 0.95 with a p-value of lower than 0.001. This is also expected because as you have increased productivity in the country, which resulted to increase of carbon emission, your people also have expectedly have uplifted their lifestyle. Now, going on to the conclusion and the recommendations of our study. The narrative about the economic progress at the expense of ecological injury has an observable basis coming from the data in the Philippines for the past 2 decades. The developing countries like the Philippines, their cry for climate justice from developed nations of the world is founded. They should rally together for such cause. Though there is a observable relationship between economic development, as denoted by the different indicators that we've looked at earlier, against the greenhouse gas emission, this is not an excuse for us to not double down on our efforts for our commitments to the Paris Agreement to achieve a net zero world by 2050. We should also explore countries in the world which have successfully decoupled GHG and GDP and use as the business case for the world. It will be a very interesting subject matter for a future study or research looking at countries like Switzerland and some other European countries which actually shows very low to non-relationship or correlation between their GHG and their economic development. With that, let me end my presentation borrowing the words of Prime Minister of Barbados, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, in the speech that she has delivered during the COP or Conference of Parties in 2021. As she said, a 2-degree rise in temperature is a death sentence to nations on the front line of climate change, just like the Philippines. This is immoral and unjust. And if our leaders' existence is to mean anything, then they must act in the interest of all of their people who are dependent on them. With that, thank you very much for your time.